The Roman conquest of Hispania was a historical period that began with the Roman landing at Epirus in 218 BC and ended with the Roman conquest of the Iberian Peninsula, then Hispania, by Caesar Augustus after the Cantabrian Wars in 19 BC. Long before the First Punic War, between the 8th and 7th centuries BC, the Phoenicians had already appeared in the southern part of the Iberian Peninsula as well as in the east, to the south of the Ebro. Their numerous commercial settlements based throughout these coastal strips provided an outlet into Mediterranean commerce for minerals and other resources of pre-Roman Iberia. These installations, consisting of little more than warehouses and wharves, allowed not only exports, but also the introduction to the peninsula of products manufactured in the eastern Mediterranean. This had the indirect effect of the native peninsular cultures adopting certain eastern characteristics. During the 7th century BC, the Greeks established their first colonies on the northern Mediterranean coast of the peninsula. Setting off from Massalia, they founded the cities of Emporion and Rhodes, although at the time they had already spread throughout the coastal commercial centers of the region without establishing a permanent presence. Part of this Greek commerce was nevertheless carried out by Phoenician shipping. Phoenician trade in the peninsula included articles both coming from and heading to Greece. As a commercial power of the western Mediterranean, Carthage expanded its interests to the island of Sicily and the south of Italy. This growing influence over the region soon proved to be an annoyance for Rome. This conflict of commercial interests ultimately led to the Punic Wars, of which the First Punic War ended in an unstable armistice. The mutual hostility led to the Second Punic War, which, after 12 years of conflict, resulted in effective Roman domination of the south and east of the Iberian Peninsula. Later, a decisive defeat for Carthage at Zama would wipe that city from the historical scene. Despite having vanquished their rival Mediterranean power, the Romans still took another 2 centuries to bring the entire Iberian Peninsula under their control through an expansionist policy that earned the enmity of practically all of the tribes of the interior. The abuses to which these people were submitted is considered to be responsible for the strong anti-Roman sentiment throughout these nations. After years of bloody conflict, the indigenous people of Hispania were finally crushed by the military and cultural heel of Rome, thus disappearing from the face of history. However, in the Roman Empire, people kept their ancestral identifications but also were loyal to the Roman state. So even though the language became Latin, the gens continued being local. Carthaginian Iberia. After the First Punic War, the Carthaginian family descending from Hamilcar Barca began the effective subjugation of Hispania, which would extend over the greater part of the south and the west of the peninsula. This subjugation was achieved through tributes, alliances, marriages, or simply by force. The peninsula would go on to supply Carthage with a significant number of troops, both mercenaries and draftees, that assisted in its confrontations with ancient Rome as well as its reaffirmation of dominance over northern Africa. The Romans considered this sufficient motive to invade Hispania. The Ilegites and the legendary Balearic slingers particularly stood out amongst these troops coming from diverse tribes of the region. The Ebro Treaty around 225, Rome sent an embassy to Hasdrubal about shared interests in Spain. The terms are unclear, and different versions are given by different later writers, but what seems clear is that the Ebro, a river that effectively cut across the northeast of the peninsula, was not to be crossed by Carthage under arms. The treaty may also have included terms relating to the independence of allies, including Saguntum, although this city was south of the Ebro. Later writers claimed it was protected and hence the war justified on behalf of Rome. The Saguntum matter. The Second Punic War between Carthage and Rome was ignited by the dispute over the hegemony of Saguntum, a Hellenized coastal city and Roman ally, after great tension within the city government culminating in the assassination of the supporters of Carthage. Hannibal laid siege to the city of Saguntum in 218 BC. The city called for Roman aid, but the Senate reacted slowly. An embassy was eventually sent, but denied access to Hannibal. It proceeded to Carthage and warned the Carthaginian leaders about the consequences of subjecting Saguntum. Following a prolonged siege and a bloody struggle in which Hannibal himself was wounded and the army practically destroyed, the Carthaginians finally took control of the city. Many of the Saguntans chose to commit suicide rather than face the subjugation and slavery that awaited them at the hands of the Carthaginians. The war later continued with Hannibal's expedition to Italia. The damage wrought throughout the Italian peninsula by this expedition provoked the Romans to invade the Iberian Peninsula in an attempt to cut off Hannibal's supplies coming from Hispania and Carthage. The Roman attack. Rome sent troops under the command of Gnaeus and Publius Cornelius Scipio. Gnaeus was the first to arrive in Hispania while his brother Publius turned towards Massalia with the goal of obtaining support and trying to halt the Carthaginian advance. Emporion, or Emperies, was the point where Rome began on the peninsula. Their first mission was to find allies among the Iberians. They signed treaties of alliance with Iberian tribal leaders on the coast but probably did not obtain support for their cause among the majority. One known example was the tribe of the Ilegites, one of the most important north of the Ebro, who were allied with the Carthaginians. Gnaeus Scipio subjugated these tribes, either by treaty or through the forces of the coast north of the Ebro, including the city of Tarraco, where Gnaeus made his residence. The war between Carthage and Rome, the first important conflict between the Carthaginians and the Romans, took place in Sissa in 218 BC, probably near Tarraco, in the present-day province of Lleida. The Carthaginians, commanded by Hanno the Elder, were defeated by Roman forces commanded by Gnaeus Cornelius Scipio Calvus. The leader of the Ilegites Indibal, who fought with the Carthaginians, was captured. But when Gnaeus' victory was certain, Hasdrubal Barca arrived with reinforcements and dispersed the Romans but did not defeat them. The Carthaginian forces returned to their capital of Carthago Nova and the Romans to their primary base at Tarraco. In 217 BC, Gnaeus' fleet vanquished Hasdrubal Barcas on the mouth of the Ebro. Shortly afterward, reinforcements arrived from Italy under the command of Publius Scipio and the Romans were able to advance on Saguntum. Gnaeus and Publius Scipio are attributed with the fortification of Tarraco and the establishment of a military port. The city wall was probably constructed over the front of an ancient wall. The marks of the Iberian stonemason can be appreciated, since the wall was constructed by hand. In 216 BC, Gnaeus and Publius Scipio fought the Iberians, probably against tribes south of the Ebro. The Iberian attacks were repelled. In 215 BC, the Carthaginians received reinforcements under the command of Hamilcar and fought again on the mouth of the Ebro, apparently near Ampasta or Sant Carles de la Rapita in the so-called Battle of Ebro River. The Roman fleet was victorious. The rebellion of Syphax in Numidia required Hasdrubal to return to Africa with his best troops, leaving his camp in Hispania to the Romans. In Africa, Hasdrubal secured the assistance of another Numidian king, Gala, lord of the region of Constantine. With the help of Gala and his son Massinissa, Hasdrubal defeated Syphax. In 211 BC, Hasdrubal Barca returned to Iberia accompanied by Massinissa and his Numidian warriors. Perhaps between 214 BC and 211 BC, Gnaeus and his brother Publius Cornelius Scipio overran the Ebro. We know for certain that in 211 BC the Scipio brothers counted among their army a strong contingent of Celtiberian mercenaries, composed of some thousands of combatants. The Celtiberians frequently acted as soldiers of fortune. The The Carthaginian forces were structured into three armies, commanded respectively by Hasdrubal Barca, Mago Barca, and Hasdrubal Gisco, the last son of the Carthaginian commander Hannibal Gisco, killed in the First Punic War. For their part, the Romans organized themselves into another three groups, commanded by Gnaeus and Publius Scipio, and also by Titus Fonteius. Hasdrubal Gisco and Mago Barca, supported by the Numidian Massinissa, vanquished Publius Scipio and killed him. Gnaeus Scipio had to retreat to the desert with his Celtiberian mercenaries, to whom Hasdrubal offered a sum greater than that paid by Rome. Gnaeus died during the withdrawal, and the Carthaginians were at the point of crossing the Ebro River when an official named Gaius Marcius Septimus, elected general by the troops, repelled them. The circumstance of this battle is uncertain, but we know that Indibilis fought again against the Carthaginians. The battle took place in 211 BC. In 210 BC, an expedition under Gaius Claudius Nero was able to capture Hasdrubal Barca, but he went back on his word and retreated dishonorably. The Roman Senate decided to send a new army to the Ebro to prevent the Carthaginian army from crossing into Italy. Leadership of this force was given to Publius Scipio, the son of the general of the same name who had died in combat in 211 BC. Publius Scipio arrived in Hispania accompanied by Marcus Junius Silanus and his advisor Caius Laelius, chief of the group. Upon his arrival, the three Carthaginian armies found themselves in this situation. Hasdrubal Barca's army was in the area around the origin of the Tajo. The army of Hasdrubal, son of Gisco, was situated in Lusitania near modern Lisboa, and Mago's army was in the area near the Strait of Gibraltar. Publius Scipio, in an audacious move, left the camp on the Ebro, and attacked Carthago Nova by land and sea. The Punic Peninsula capital was given an insufficient defense force under the command of a new leader who was also called Mago, had to surrender, and the city was occupied by the Romans. Publius Scipio returned to Tarraco before Hasdrubal could move out of his camp on the Ebro. After this daring operation, a large part of Hispania Ulterior was subdued by Rome. Publius Scipio attracted various Iberian chiefs until then allied with the Carthaginians, such as Edico, Indibal, and Mandonius. In the winter of 209 and 208 BC, Publius Scipio advanced south and collided with the army of Hasdrubal Barca near Santo Tomé in the hamlet of Barrecula, where the Battle of Barrecula took place. Publius Scipio was victorious, but he did not prevent Hasdrubal Barca from escaping to the north with a sizable remainder of his troops. In his northern march, Hasdrubal arrived at the passes of the Western Pyrenees. So it is known that Hasdrubal crossed the Pyrenees through the country of the Basques. He probably tried to make an alliance with them, and in this case, the Basques lacked the means to oppose the Carthaginian advance. Hasdrubal camped in the south of the Galius and later passed into Italy. In 2008 BC, Mago Barca retreated with his forces to the Balearic Islands and Hasdrubal Gisco supported him in Lusitania. In 207 BC, the reorganized Carthaginians and their reinforcements left Africa under Hannon's leadership, managing to recover most of the south of the peninsula. After Hannon subdued this region, Mago returned with his forces and met with Hasdrubal Gisco. But soon after, Hannon and Mago were defeated by the Romans led by Marcus Silanus. Hannon was captured, and Hasdrubal Gisco and Mago had to fortify their armies at the most important places. Hasdrubal Gisco and Mago Barca received new reinforcements from Africa and for their part recruited an army of natives. They gave battle to the Romans at Ilipa, but on this occasion Publius Scipio Africanus clearly obtained victory. Mago and Hasdrubal Gisco took refuge in Gades, and Publius Scipio gained control over the entire south of the peninsula. He could cross to Africa and meet the Numidian king Syphax, who had visited him in Hispania. Publius Scipio fell ill, which was taken advantage of by the army as an opportunity to demand higher wages by the mutiny at Sucro. This in turn was taken advantage of by the Ilogetes and other Iberian tribes who rebelled under the leadership of the chiefs Indabilis and Mandonius. This rebellion was essentially against proconsul Shell, Lentulus and L. Manlius. Publius Scipio appeased the mutineers and put down a final bloody revolt by the Iberians. Mandonius was caught and executed. Indibal managed to escape. Mago and Hasdrubal Gisco abandoned Gades with all of their ships and the troops to support Hannibal in Italy. And after the departure of these forces, Rome held the entire south of Hispania. Rome now ruled from the Pyrenees to Algarve along the coast. Roman dominance reached Huesca and from there, the Ebro to the south and the sea to the east.